Before we get to the video, I'd like to take time to thank Stephanie A for her pledge on Patreon. I really appreciate it. If you would like to support the channel via Patreon, super thanks, and or buy me a coffee. Information for those methods of support will be below. Once I receive your donation, I will give you a shout out accordingly. As I alluded to earlier this week, we're going to take a look at a slew of players that could be potentially traded and or signing elsewhere here soon. More specifically, we'll be examining high-profile players that are stars for their respective teams. We'll be looking at their current situations, the likelihood of them being traded, and where they could ultimately end up. And with that, here are 4-star players who could be traded very soon. The Detroit Red Wings have been an interesting team to watch thus far, as they're not necessarily a bottom feeder anymore, but they're also not a hard hitter within their division either. GM Steve Yzerman has been patient with his group, and has been giving the young core time to develop and to thrive in the Motor City. Another thing that Stevie Y has been patient with lately is upcoming contracts, as players including Tyler Bertuzzi and Dylan Larkin, who are pending UFAs, have yet to be extended. This uncertainty has caused many to speculate on the future of the team. When it comes to Dylan Larkin, the captain is in the final year of his 5-year, $30.5 million contract. Interestingly, his deal also has a no-trade clause built in for the final year. Therefore, if he were to be moved, Larkin would have to give the ultimate okay. Due to his production over the years, it's looking like the forward will be asking for around $8 to $10 million a season. Currently, Larkin is on nearly a point per game pace with 35 in 38 games played. NHL insider Elliot Friedman recently shared his thoughts on the Larkin situation. What is the surest prediction of future behavior is past behavior. Look at who he is negotiating with. Steve Yzerman has a line. You want to stay here. We are not going over that line. That is where I think we are there, Friedman says. Now, it's probably pretty unlikely that Yzerman would willingly part with Larkin without a number 1 center in return. One scenario that, according to Nick Kyprios, could work is swapping Larkin for Bo Horvat from Vancouver. While there's still a fine chance that the Michigan native re-ups with his longtime team, it's still fun to speculate. New Jersey is another intriguing option, which would give them an even more lethal top 6 for the postseason. One of the biggest surprises of the season has been the steady success of the Boston Bruins. Since David Krejci rejoined the fold, things have been clicking on all cylinders for the Bee, as Boston currently leads the league in points by a landslide. With a points percentage of .829, the Bruins, after 41 games played, have only been dealt 5 regulation losses. But despite the certainty that pervades the team as far as the playoffs are concerned, things are up in the air regarding contracts. If we simply open up Cap Friendly, it's pretty clear that GM Don Sweeney has had his work cut out for him this offseason. The biggest question mark in Beantown has been the future regarding David Pastrana. Obviously, it would be silly for Sweeney to deal Pasta prior to the postseason action, but the possibility still remains that he could be moved afterwards before free agency. Currently, the forward is nearing the end of his 6-year deal valued at $40 million. Interestingly, a modified no-trade clause is also built in, meaning that Pasta would have to submit a 10-team no-trade list accordingly. Most of us can remember last offseason the article from The Athletic that captured the headlines, stating that an inside source that's close to Pastrnak revealed that he wouldn't be re-upping with the team as long as Sweeney was in Boston. 88 Asin Aldon has treated his 2 best friends, the source close to Pastrnak wrote The Athletic. No chance he comes back with Sweens as GM. Now, at the end of the day, players can change their minds. But for the sake of context, I thought it was important to include that element to the story. As far as the contract itself is concerned, the real issue seems to be value. Currently behind Connor McDavid, Pasta has the 2nd most goals league-wide with 32. Connor Ryan at Boston.com suggests that if Pasta were to go to the open market, he could surpass Nathan McKinnon and become the highest paid player in the league. A few teams that make sense as destinations for Pasta include the Anaheim Ducks, New Jersey Devils, and LA Kings. Speaking of Bo Horvat, well, to say negotiations have went well for the captain would be pretty misleading, as Horvat has failed to see eye to eye with Canucks management when it comes to his new contract. And really, most of us watching probably can't blame the forward for holding out on his longtime team. Currently, with 45 points scored and 40 games played, Horvat has managed to still be productive despite the dysfunction and chaos around him. Considering the fact that he's already netted 29 goals just speaks to the value that he could bring any potential suitor that hypothetically lands him. As some of you may remember, when we last spoke about Horvat in November, we covered the possibility of him being moved to the Motor City. What Kip Buros had to say regarding this situation months ago was that if Larkin could be signed by the deadline, then Detroit could still make a move for Horvat and keep their captain in the lineup. Now here we have another scenario which, in my opinion, makes more sense. Vancouver deals Horvat, but doesn't acquire Larkin, but instead picks prospects and a roster player. Detroit receives a top 6 forward that can slot in behind Larkin, giving the Wings a deadly 1-2 punch down the middle. Obviously some work would have to be done to secure a contract for Horvat, but it does sound like, on the surface, the perfect scenario for Detroit. Maybe Filip Zadina could be added into the package, but Yzerman would definitely first and foremost have to send his first overall pick over to entice GM Patrick Allvin. For Patrick Kane, this season, the speculation of his ultimate departure from Chicago being on the horizon has never been greater, as Kane was one of the few bright spots last season that the Hawks had to offer. Following only 78 games played, Showtime, as he's known, was able to notch 92 points throughout. Currently a pending UFA, Kane carries a $10.5 million cap hit. Despite this though, if a prospective team was able to get creative enough, his remaining money owed wouldn't be hard to produce. However, here recently the prospect of Kane being dealt has hit a small snag, as the winger has been sidelined with a nagging injury. Recently, Elliot Friedman revealed that Kane may actually need surgery in order to be back into commission on ice. Given that the deadline is less than 2 months away, this definitely makes the prospect of a Kane blockbuster less likely to happen. Since Kane has had more time on his hands, he was able to comment on his thoughts regarding his future during an interview with Sportsnet. It's a different year, obviously going into the last year of your contract, and different variables about what's going to happen or where you're going to be the rest of your career. Different things like that, Kane says. You think about that stuff, especially when it comes into January here and got a couple months till the trade deadline. We'll see how it all shakes out, he says. A couple teams that have been tied to Kane at great length are the Edmonton Oilers and New York Rangers. With 27 points and 37 games played on the season so far, if Kane is somehow able to be healthy before March 3rd, it'll be very interesting to see where he ends up.